On a busy intersection in downtown Chicago, every afternoon around 1 p.m., a sleek black Ford Explorer would pull over by the curb. Stepping out of the SUV was Officer Madison Carter, a strong and respected lieutenant in the Chicago Police Department. Known for her unshakable discipline, sharp mind, and fearlessness in the face of corruption, Madison commanded respect everywhere she went. But she had a side the public rarely saw, a softer, quieter version of herself. And the only person who ever witnessed that side of her was a homeless man named Daniel, an old, silent figure who sat every day under the rusting bus stop shelter on 9th Avenue. Every day, Madison would stop her car, get out with a small paper bag, and hand Daniel either a sandwich, a meal, or a few dollars. He never asked, never begged. He would simply bow his head and say, "Thank you, ma'am." Nobody questioned her, but passersby noticed. Why would a high-ranking police officer bring food to the same homeless man every day? Whispers spread, theories floated, but no one dared to ask her directly. 2 years ago, Madison had lost her husband, Eric, a fellow cop in what the department officially listed as a tragic car accident during a stakeout. She had never recovered. Since then, her world had become routine, rigid, colorless. She had no time for grief, not with a badge on her chest, and yet this ritual, giving food to Daniel, somehow gave her peace. Then one gray afternoon, while a light drizzle misted the sidewalks, Daniel did something he had never done before. Madison walked up as usual, lunch bag in hand, but instead of his usual nod and thanks, Daniel looked up and asked bluntly, "Ma'am, will you marry me?" Madison froze. "What did you just say?" she asked, unsure if she heard him right. Daniel smiled faintly. "I said, I want to marry you. Please, ma'am." She scoffed, half laughing. "You must be out of your mind." "I have my reasons," Daniel said softly, voice calm and cryptic. "And if you knew the truth, it would shake you." Madison's amusement faded into unease. What truth? But Daniel said nothing more that day. The next day she returned, curiosity pulling at her. She brought him his lunch, but before she could speak, Daniel leaned in and whispered, "Something is about to happen in this city. Something terrible. But I can stop it. I need you to trust me." "What the hell are you talking about?" she asked. He looked around cautiously. "There's a weapons drop happening tonight, 16th Street behind the old warehouse. 10 guys, AKs, vests. They're planning something big." She narrowed her eyes. "How do you know this?" Daniel just said, "Because I see everything." Madison drove off, shaken, but something told her to take it seriously. That night, she quietly dispatched a team to investigate, and sure enough, they found a hidden cache of illegal weapons. 10 men were arrested on site. It was real, and it was only the beginning. The following days, Daniel told her more. Details about robberies before they happened, about drug shipments still in transit. Everything he said turned out to be true. Madison's colleagues started noticing her strange behavior, her growing reliance on this homeless man's cryptic intel. But she kept it quiet. Eventually, she stopped bringing him food. Instead, she brought coffee. They talked more about the city, about justice, about loneliness. One day he said something that made her blood run cold. "You love rainy days," Daniel said, sipping his coffee. "You once told your husband that the best way to mourn was with coffee and rain." Madison looked up sharply. "How do you know that?" He just smiled. That night, as she drove home, she found her car stalling at an empty intersection. It was late, streets were deserted. Suddenly, through the darkness, a figure emerged. "Daniel." "You shouldn't be here alone, ma'am," he said calmly. "Let me help." He popped the hood, fiddled for a minute, and the engine roared back to life. Madison stared at him. "Come with me," she said. "Come to my house tonight." He hesitated. "I don't want to cross a line." "You already have," she said. "Please." That night, she served him dinner. He ate quietly, almost solemnly. Then, with a whisper, he said, "This food, it reminds me of someone I once loved very deeply." And Madison's heart trembled. She couldn't explain it, but deep inside her, something had already changed. The morning after that strange and tender dinner, Lieutenant Madison Carter sat in her office, staring at a photo frame on her desk. It was a picture of her and Eric, taken 3 months before the accident. His smile in that photo, easy, genuine, comforting, now felt like a ghost's grin. But last night's conversation with Daniel had stirred something impossible. The way he described her cooking, the way he remembered her words, the way he looked at her. It was uncanny. Could it be? No. Eric was dead. His body had been identified. Funeral held. End of story. Still, doubts gnawed at her. She called her trusted friend and forensic analyst, Detective Jeremy Brooks. He was someone she trusted with her life. "Jeremy," she said, voice low, "I need a favor. Off the record. I need you to run a facial recognition analysis." Of who? She sent him a blurry photo she had secretly taken of Daniel 2 days earlier. "That's a homeless guy I've been working with," she said vaguely. "I just have a weird feeling. If you can match his face to any existing police records, especially from old department files, I'd appreciate it." Jeremy didn't ask questions. "Give me 24 hours. That evening, Madison returned home to find Daniel sitting on her porch steps, sipping tea. "You always find your way back here, huh?" she said lightly. Daniel gave him a small nod. "I feel safe here." There was a pause. Then Madison asked, "Tell me something. Who were you before this life, before the streets?" Daniel looked off into the distance. "Before this, I wore a badge." Madison's heart skipped. "You were a cop?" He didn't answer directly, just said sometimes the only way to expose rot is to crawl into the sewer. That night she couldn't sleep. The next morning Jeremy called. "Jeremy," he said, his voice tense, "I need you to sit down." Her stomach twisted. "What is it?" "I ran the photo through our system. I didn't expect anything, but..." He took a breath. It came back a 96% match to Eric Carter. Madison felt like the floor dropped beneath her. "That can't be." "I know," Jeremy whispered, "but I double-checked. And there's more. The DNA we filed from Eric's old medical exam is still in our archive. If you can get a sample, hair, saliva, anything, from this man, we'll know for sure." She hung up, hands shaking. That evening, she invited Daniel in for dinner again. They sat in silence longer than usual. At one point, he looked up at her and said, "You okay?" She smiled faintly. "Just a long day." As she cleared his plate, she made sure to keep the fork he used, placing it carefully into a Ziploc bag. That night, she didn't sleep. The next day, she dropped the sample off at the lab, heart pounding. 3 days later, the results came in. Jeremy met her outside the precinct, looking grim. "It's a perfect match," he said quietly. "Dallas is Eric." Madison felt her knees weaken. How is that possible?" "I don't know," Jeremy said. "But someone lied, either to you or to the entire department." She drove home, tears welling in her eyes. That evening, she confronted Daniel. She didn't ask, she didn't accuse. She just stared at him and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel sighed. "I wanted to. God, I wanted to." "Then why didn't you? I buried you. I cried for you for 2 years. I mourned you." "I know," he said, tears finally rising in his eyes. "I watched you cry from across the street. I watched you stand at my grave. I watched you go back to work wearing that armor on your heart. And I hated myself for letting it happen." Madison was shaking. "So why?" Daniel looked at her in the eyes, voice low and hollow. "Because I never died. The accident, it wasn't an accident. It was a setup. Someone wanted me gone because I was too close to exposing something huge inside the department. They rigged my brakes, made sure the crash looked fatal, but I survived. And when I woke up in a private clinic outside the city, I had no ID, no access, no badge. Only a message. Disappear or she dies." "She, as in me?" Madison whispered. He nodded. "They were watching you. I saw it in surveillance. I knew if I returned, you'd be their next target. So I did the only thing I could.
I became no one. Tears ran down her cheeks. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hold him. She didn't know which urge was stronger. Finally, she whispered, "And now?" Daniel leaned closer. "Now I'm done hiding. The people who faked my death, they're still operating, still inside the system. But now we take them down together."
Story Part 3. That night, Madison Carter couldn't sleep. Her heart felt like it had been stitched back together with trembling hands. Fragile, raw, beating to a rhythm she hadn't known in years. Her husband was alive. Eric Carter. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a dream. He was flesh and blood, hiding in plain sight all this time. And now, he wanted to fight back. By morning, Madison had made up her mind. She called a private meeting with Captain Ramirez, her immediate superior, and someone she cautiously trusted. "Captain," she said in a low voice, "I'm working on something off the books. Something I need your discretion for." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "This about the warehouse bus last week? The informant?" "Yes," she said, careful with her words. "He's not who we thought he was. And I believe the conspiracy goes higher than street-level dealers. I need a team. Quiet, loyal, no leaks." Ramirez leaned back, thoughtful. "You got it. But be careful, Carter. You're digging close to hell." She nodded grimly. "I know." Meanwhile, Eric, or Daniel, as the world still knew him, began mapping out everything he'd gathered in the 2 years he'd lived as a ghost. He'd scouted abandoned factories, traced shell companies, even overheard conversations between men in suits with hollow smiles. One name kept returning: Senator Philip Marks. A well-loved public figure, advocate for inner-city reforms, and regular guest on national TV. But underneath the applause and handshakes, Eric suspected he ran a covert network, trafficking weapons, laundering drug money, and eliminating threats from within law enforcement itself. Eric spread out the evidence across Madison's kitchen table. Blueprints, photos, timestamps, accounts with cryptic transactions. "This is what got me killed," he said quietly. Madison examined a photo, one that made her blood run cold. It was a picture taken 4 months before Eric's accident. In it, Eric stood in a dim hallway, flanked by 2 men. One of them was unmistakably Chief Bradley Vaughn, head of internal affairs. "Bradley?" she whispered. "No, he's clean, honest, above suspicion." Eric finished for her. "Yeah, I thought so too." It became clear internal affairs had been compromised. The same unit that should have investigated Eric's death had orchestrated the cover-up. Madison clenched her fists. "We can't go through official channels, not if IA is involved." "I wasn't planning to, but there's something else." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a list of names: officers, judges, city council members. Every one of them connected by one thing. All had been promoted, protected, or pardoned after donating to a fake veterans fund. A fund run by Senator Philip Marks. Madison was speechless. This wasn't just corruption. This was systemic rot. "I need to meet him," she finally said. "Senator Marks." Eric's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "I won't go as a cop. I'll go as a woman he thinks he can control." A week later, dressed in civilian clothes and armed only with a wire under her blouse, Madison attended a private fundraising dinner at a luxury hotel in downtown D.C. She had secured an invite through a mutual contact, someone she knew had ties to Marks. The ballroom shimmered with champagne flutes and chandeliers. Laughter floated over the scent of caviar and politics. And there he was, Senator Philip Marks. Tall, confident, with a smile too white to be real. He noticed Madison immediately. His eyes lingered just a second too long. "You must be Lieutenant Carter, yes?" he said, extending his hand. "Just Madison tonight," she said smoothly. "Of course. Sometimes we all need a break from titles. Please, join me." They talked for nearly half an hour. He was charming, sharp, and chilling. Madison played her part. Flirty, naive, curious. But when he leaned in and whispered, "You remind me of someone who used to be a problem," her heart skipped. "Who?" she asked. He smiled like a wolf. "Your husband." Then he stood up. "I hope we can meet again, Madison." Back in her car, Madison ripped off the wire mic and hit the call button. "Eric, you got that?" "I got all of it. Every word." But before she could breathe relief, a black SUV screeched in behind her vehicle. Two men in suits jumped out, guns drawn. "Get out of the car!" She ducked instinctively. Her side window exploded. She rolled to the passenger side and kicked open the door. Bullets chased her down the alley as she sprinted into the shadows. She lost them 2 blocks later. By the time she reached her apartment, blood was dripping from a graze on her arm, her adrenaline crashing. Eric opened the door, eyes wide. "Jesus, what happened?" she gasped. "Marks knows. He knows I'm not just Madison." Eric helped her inside. "You shouldn't have gone alone," she breathed. "And now we have it." Eric's face darkened. "Then we hit back. No more hiding." She nodded slowly. "We bring it all down. Starting tonight." The clock ticked past midnight in the small apartment Madison and Eric now treated as their war room. A whiteboard on the wall was covered in red marker, strings connecting photos, names, and locations. Their window blinds stayed drawn. The lights remained low. Outside, the streets of Chicago lay quiet. But for Madison and Eric, it was the calm before a storm. They had everything they needed. Audio recordings of Senator Philip Marks hinting at the murder of Eric Carter, documents linking shell companies to internal affairs, a list of dirty cops and politicians funded by Marx's fake veterans charity, and, most important of all, Eric Carter himself. A man once declared dead, now ready to tell the world the truth. But if they wanted to win, they needed to do more than survive. They had to go public. "I'm sending everything to Captain Ramirez tonight," Madison said, fingers flying over the keyboard. "He's the only one left I trust. If he gets it into the hands of the FBI, we have a shot." Eric sat beside her, bandaging the graze on her arm from the earlier ambush. "You're assuming they won't come for us before dawn." "I know they will," she said, eyes cold. "But we'll be ready." 2:14 a.m. A soft knock at the door. 3 taps. Their agreed signal. Madison grabbed her sidearm and crept to the peephole. It was Detective Jeremy Brooks, her old friend, the only one from the department she'd brought in on their secret. She opened the door just wide enough. Jeremy stepped in, looking tense. "I couldn't sit this one out. Ramirez is in. He's already forwarded everything to the federal task force. But there's a problem. Marks knows. He's mobilizing everyone he's got. Dirty cops, private contractors. He wants you both dead by morning." Madison exchanged a look with Eric. "Then we finish it tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now." Jeremy nodded grimly. "There's only one place left to expose this properly." 3:30 a.m. WRC News Tower, Chicago. The 3 of them broke into the emergency stairwell of the largest local news station. Madison had worked security for them during protests years ago. She knew the night crew. She knew the way in. Inside the 12th floor control room, a skeleton crew of 2 journalists froze as Madison raised her badge. "Put us live. Right now." The anchor hesitated. "We need a producer.
Jeremy tossed the flash drive on the desk. This contains evidence of murder, corruption, and conspiracy involving a sitting U.S. senator and members of Chicago's law enforcement. If you don't air it now, you become complicit. A pause. Then the anchor nodded. 3:47 a.m. Live broadcast. The city of Chicago, and within minutes, the rest of the nation was staring at a live feed of Lieutenant Madison Carter and a man the world believed was dead. "I'm Lieutenant Madison Carter," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of what she carried. "And beside me is Eric Carter, my husband, a former CPD officer who was declared dead 2 years ago." She looked directly into the camera. "He was not killed in a car accident. He was targeted, silenced by a group operating inside our justice system. Today, we are naming them Senator Philip Marks, Chief Bradley Vaughn, several officers whose names you'll see on the screen." She uploaded documents, video, audio, names, faces. Then Eric stepped forward. "I've lived the past 2 years in the shadows,